All right, good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us virtually. We have one brave soul who's braved the weather here in person with us today, and we so appreciate it. So we do have about 15 others who are joining online. So just a reminder that as you guys have questions, there is a Q&A section or a button within Teams that you can ask questions. Just go ahead and hit submit, and then as we get to whichever portion, we will get those questions over to Lynn or Justin, or a little later when we give a CARES Act update. We have a few others who are also joining us virtually to just kind of say a few words. Otherwise, I will pass it over to Lynn for our regular production for Director's Cut.
Thanks, Katie. And questions for our CARES Act folks, they're going to come in the same way?
Correct. Yep. And then I will ask those of each of our attendees who are on the line.
Okay, great. Thanks. Well, I too want to say thank you for tuning in or traveling in. You try to pick a day in January when you could have people in the conference room and do a live meeting, and then you get a winter storm, and that's North Dakota. But thanks again. So we're talking about November production, and this is really the month that we've been waiting for all year. We saw oil production jump by 4.4%. So we got to 1,160,000 barrels a day, essentially, which is 5.4% above revenue forecast. Really good news there. Along with that, natural gas production was up significantly, 2.4%. That's unusual for North Dakota as well, to see natural gas production increase at roughly half the rate of oil production. And I think what we're observing there is significant work in what we call the Tier 2 and Tier 3 areas outside the core area, as people are beginning to implement 3-mile laterals and different drilling strategies to start developing that lesser developed area. But that's exciting news there as well. Oil prices very, very strong. Today's WTI is at $82. And we had the question last month about $100 oil. When we talk about EIA forecasts, it certainly is a possibility. We'll see what happens as OPEC continues to roll out production increases. But November oil price, North Dakota market was $73.70. That's 47% above revenue forecast. And we're estimating today's price at $78, which is about 56% above revenue forecast. So state revenues, local government revenues, very, very strong in November. Rig count still is very slowly creeping up. 32 rigs in November, 32 in December, 32 today. We've been as high as 35, but wintertime and people, not really wanting to do a lot of site construction and rig mobilization in the wintertime. So it's going to be slow going for January, February, and March. New Mexico, by the way, by contrast, is at 95 rigs. They don't experience winter the same way we do, especially in southeastern New Mexico in the Permian Basin. So their rig count has been growing much more rapidly. Good news on the waiting on completion wells. That's down. Inactive wells not up much. That's pretty typical when we get winter weather starting to set in. Well completions were just slightly more than double of what we had in the revenue forecast. So that's very encouraging too. 60 in November, which is 50% above revenue forecast. December 81. So that's also very promising. We set a new all-time high in terms of the number of active wells producing, and we saw increased drilling on Fort Berthold Reservation. So that was encouraging. Now, a little bit of a dark cloud. We're seeing gas nominations way, way down, starting with the extreme cold weather that we saw at Christmas time. And that has continued. In fact, one of our gas plants, one of those grasslands plant, is offline, and so If that translates, which we think it does, because we're not seeing, we're not getting reports of extreme amounts of flaring in the field. If that translates into oil production drop, then we're going to see a significant oil production drop probably coming up in the January numbers, which we'll be reporting in March. Things looked very strong through the first 3.5 weeks of December. Every bit as good as November, maybe even a little bit better. But that last week of December, things started to drop, and then all through January, we've seen significantly lower gas production estimates, and so January could be a pretty tough month, and so we'll watch for that as we're moving forward. OPEC met last week decided to continue with their 400,000 barrel a day increases each month. So we're going to see a gradual increase in OPEC plus production, which brings us really to the two graphs that show us world and U.S. oil supply and demand. We're in uncharted territory in terms of U.S. stocks. So don't be looking for any, oil price relief in the near-term future. What you see in gray there is the 5-year average, the high and low. And so that's over the last 5 years, the lowest that oil storage has been and the highest that it's been in any given month or on any given day. And you can see we're below the lowest and well below it. So on the U.S. side, inventories that built up during the pandemic are gone. Also, when you look at the world EIA forecast on the right-hand side, you can see that basically world inventories are gone too this quarter. And so we're going to be running a very tight network between supply and demand forecast, projecting all the way out to 2023. What that probably means is higher oil prices, and we're seeing it. We're in the low 80s for WTI and Brent, and so that there isn't any real relief in sight for that in terms of world oil supply and demand, and the industry has been underinvesting. So that will continue into the foreseeable future. When we look at natural gas, good news on our gas capture. We're well above the 91% goal, and industry is very focused on this. So statewide, we're at 94%. In the Bakken, we're at 95%. We just have, the one field in the fee area of Fort Berthold, Big Bend field, that's dragging that number down. And our production people are talking with the operators there and also with flare mitigation companies about what we can do to improve flare mitigation in that area. So we've got 3 areas that we're focused in: Big Bend Field, Deepwater Creek Bay, and then also Charleston Field. So we're very focused, and we've begun our most recent round of meetings with midstream companies to talk about those issues, and so we will be focusing on that. Nothing really to mention new in terms of the federal areas, and so with that, I think I'll stop, Katie, and we'll take questions on the director's cut. And then are we going to turn to CARES Act, or are we going to do Justin first?
We'll shift over to Justin.
Shift over to Justin. All right. So a little Q&A.
Well, I do have one question that's coming online. So do we know when the last time production increased by 4.4 or over that 4%? And also if there's any just main factors from that big jump that attributed to it?
Yeah, so great question. And I did do a little bit of research. The last time we saw this kind of a production increase, and I think you'll see it on Justin's graph, was when we were first coming out of the pandemic, and we were starting at much lower numbers. So it's been over a year since we saw a production increase of this nature. And what's behind it is that we actually got as high as 12 frac crews operating in the state in the month of November. And so it was completions, virtually everything that was being drilled by the 33 rigs in November was being completed, and we completed 40 duck wells. So when you add, the 60 or so wells that could be drilled by that November rig count and the 40 duck wells, it was all about completion crews. And of course, part of what allowed that is the excess gathering and processing capacity that we have. So we were able to do it without seeing the flaring numbers go up.
Excellent. Any questions in the room? Perfect. I do have a few more that are coming in.
Great.
Could you then on the gas side, could you explain why gas production began declining a little in December and then through January, and how that may affect oil production?
Yeah. So what happened? If you lived in North Dakota, you felt it real time. Starting about 2 days before Christmas, our temperatures plunged to sub-zero temperatures, and I believe that we had some periods in there of a week or more, particularly up in the Williston area where a lot of this oil and gas is produced, where the temperature never got above zero night or day. And so we had lots of gas gathering freeze-offs, gathering pipelines froze off, pigging operations were severely hindered, and the gas production really hasn't recovered from that. And so in order to beat the gas capture goals and not put gas to flare, operators reduced oil production in keeping with what the gathering capacity was. So it's all about the cold weather. And we've seen, wind chills hit the minus 50s, minus 60s, and we've seen actual air temperatures in the minus 20s and 30s. And so our gas gathering system really suffers when we hit temperatures like that.
Speaking of those temperatures, there have been some recent incident reports. One question came in, how does the freezing temperatures affect any shut-ins in wells? Have we seen an increase in shut-ins? And then can you elaborate how cold temperatures affect equipment?
Mm-hmm. So I've got lots of reports of wells being shut in up in our legacy fields in Bottineau, Renville, and Burke County. A lot of low volume producers up there that produce a lot of produced water. And when we get blizzards and snowstorms and we start to see the expense of road plowing and that sort of thing, then they just shut the wells in for the winter. So lots of reports there. Mostly on the Bakken side, people have just reduced production to match up their gas production with what the gathering capacity is. But we have had a number of incidents, as you related. As the ground freezes, pipelines shift. Any equipment on the surface is subject to freezing and breaking. And interestingly enough, operators have implemented a lot of SCADA and automatic shutdowns. But what we found out is those only work when the electric power is on, when the grid is working. And we've had some power outages. And so we had a few incidents where oil went to a flare, or there was an oil spray that came out of a flare stack. So again, all related to the cold and the wind.
Shifting a little bit back to production, that upward increase that we saw, this is Adam just wondering about other factors on that production jump, but do we expect this upward trend to continue in the coming months, or is it just a short-term jump?
So we think December will be a good month. January and February, maybe even March will not. I am still planning to make a couple trips in February and March to talk to oil company CEOs. The polling information or the surveys that have been done by Oil and Gas Journal indicate that capital investment is going to jump substantially in 2022. That'll be 19% more than in 2019. So than in 2020. So that indicates that as we come out of winter and start to look at May, June, July, we should be back to these nice production growth numbers. I remember saying, well, let's don't be expecting any 50,000 barrel a day numbers, and then here we have one. So again, it's pretty volatile. but we anticipate January, February, maybe even March could be difficult numbers with significant drops in production. But after that, as we exit winter, we're expecting a half a dozen more rigs in the second quarter, half a dozen more in third and fourth quarter, and significant growth second, third, fourth quarter of this year.
Can you talk about what's behind record highs on producing well count? That number continues to increase and it's very consistent. Are there any specific factors just on the well count side of things?
Dominantly, that is duck wells being completed, and also the reduction in our inactive well count. So we have been very aggressive in terms of writing letters to operators, putting wells on abandoned status and demanding that operators get the wells back on production. And so we have aggressively pursued inactive wells, and the operators have responded appropriately. And then the duck well count, as you can see, it continues to drop month to month. So I guess the other thing that the disconnect between record numbers of wells and not record production has to do with restraint. We're seeing oil companies, even in the face of these very, very good oil prices, restrain production in order to meet the gas capture requirements.
Are there any updates on carbon storage for this month? Have we gotten any updates on when Red Trail Energy might be starting their project?
Yeah, so Red Trail Energy originally, I think, was anticipating a startup here in January, but they've pushed that back a month or so because of the severe winter weather. They've got to build their capture facility, but definitely first quarter of this year, they should start injections. We will be taking Project Tundra, the Dakota project, to the commission at their January 21st meeting. So we're going to be recommending approval of the project, and we'll see what the commission does with that. That will become one of the largest in the world in terms of the injection volumes there. So we're pretty excited about that one. We do have 2 seismic projects that are going, and they're both in the carbon storage world. So we have no seismic underway in the oil and gas business right now, but we have 2 active seismic surveys, and those are both for pore space definition and geologic characterization for carbon storage. So that industry is moving forward rapidly. It was exciting to see the announcement that the Grand Forks Fertilizer Company plans to put their carbon on the Summit pipeline and bring that to carbon storage. So very, very focused in terms of industry on lowering the carbon footprint.
Any other questions for Lynn? All right, and we will have Lynn back a little later for the CARES Act update.
So before I exit stage right, one announcement, and that is that our website should be 95% active by the end of the day. Switches are being flipped as we speak, and so I know that it's well behind the planned schedule. I know that it stopped being live, and the data that people were looking for in like that second half of July timeframe, with the exception of rig counts, which should happen within the next week or two in terms of the drilling rigs doing what they're supposed to be doing. But by the end of the day, everything that you're used to looking at in terms of well statuses and new wells and permits and production should be live on the website again. So great news there.
Yeah, I can hear the cheers coming through the computer.
When you're ready.
When you're ready.
Perfect. Well, good morning, everyone. Justin Kringstead, Director of the North Dakota Pipeline Authority. I'll try and be brief. I know we've got some exciting things coming after myself when we get to the other folks that are joining today. So With that, we'll just quickly look at what's happening in our neighboring states. Rig counts, Eastern Montana, South Dakota remain at 0. I don't anticipate any near-term changes. The production impacts that Lynn was alluding to on the North Dakota side of the basin, I'm expecting that as we see some of those December, January, February numbers, that those neighboring states will also feel that. So when we look again at holistically what our region needs to do from a transportation and processing perspective, we'll keep that in the back of our minds. Slide 3, again, a healthy jump up, as Lynn talked about. Again, the one bit of a surprise to me was on the gas side. I would have expected to see some of those gas volumes month to month be a bit higher, but as Lynn talked about, again, some of those fringe areas, just that initial GOR rate starts slightly lower. I do still have the long-term view that those areas, even if they start with a lower GOR, that in the coming months and years, those GORs are going to continue to ramp up. So we'll continue to see significant gas growth going forward. I'm going to bump through the pie chart just to slide 5. Some of the changes that you'll see here from a month-to-month perspective on the crude oil side. We did see a jump up a bit in use of crude by rail. We'll talk about that when we look at what was happening in some of the marketplaces. We saw a slight dip in refining in the basin and a slight dip in pipeline utilization on a percentage basis. When we look at the crude by rail numbers, jumping up about 20 to 25,000 barrels per day estimated between October and November, with almost exclusively any incremental oil heading out to the west coast, the Pacific Northwest. If you remember last month, we talked about the Trans Mountain pipeline, that outage that did occur in November. So maybe we'll see once additional data comes in, we may be able to connect some dots and think that that may have at least some role in some of these incremental barrels potentially going out to that Pacific Northwest. And then as you'll see here in a second on pricing, that East Coast Pad 1, when we look at slide 8, again, the number that I use in my head between Pad 1 pricing, Pad 5 pricing, it costs typically, the rule of thumb is an extra $1 or $2 to go to the East Coast versus the West Coast on rail. And so when you see that tight price markets between those areas, the incentive just isn't there. So if you're a barrel that has flexibility right now, you're looking at pipe and you're looking at potentially a Pacific Northwest in order to capture some of those higher priced markets. And where we sit today, healthy pricing across the board. Again, the ones that stand out to me that affect us here in North Dakota most directly, obviously what's happening at Clearbrook. Again, in years past, very rarely did we see any type of premium, and we've had premiums in that market now for a number of months, which is, again, bodes well for North Dakota. When we look at November oil pricing in the basin, the average discount was $5.41, which again is much better than what we've seen historically. Again, that rule of thumb was typically $7 to $8 discount at the wellhead in North Dakota. And so to see that sub 6 is very encouraging for the industry. It's great for the royalty owners, the state, the producers. So again, healthy prices across the board, which are encouraging. No major changes in that movement north and south of the border between us and Canada. Again, things moving hand in hand, so I won't spend much time there. The third straight month of identical flaring numbers when we look at what's happening on the gas capture side, where the challenges are locally, continues to be on those systems that are connected, those wells that are connected, but just can't move all of the gas that's being produced into those processing and capture systems. And so in slide 12 now, again, that 2% is going to continue to be very difficult to shake. I think maybe we can shave down, make some improvements, another 1 or 2% on that flaring that's occurring from connected systems as we get additional processing online in the future, as optimizations continue and compression expansions out in the field. Again, folks, even though they're exceeding the state targets, they're not taking their eye off the ball here on the gas capture by any means. And I know the midstream companies themselves are pressuring themselves internally to optimize as best they can. More good news on the gas capture side. That black line, that is new wells capturing gas versus new wells producing gas. And so there was a 1 month window a couple months ago where we saw more wells coming on than were getting connected. This was a good catch-up month that we saw in November. This will, again, as the theme has been today, the wintertime challenges, this just continues to get more difficult as things get cold, the ground freezes. So again, we'll keep a close eye on that. But again, the will and the desire of the producers as well as the midstream is well aligned here. The EIA has not changed their outward, at least several year price forecast. They're still expecting some weakening over the next several years. A big shift will come to this chart here for the next month's press conference. Here at the beginning of February, the EIA will come out with their new annual long-term outlook for all energy markets. So when we come to this February event next month, I'll have a refreshed long-term multi-decade price look that will wrap into our models and our assumptions here for the state of North Dakota. Again, as I talked about on the gas oil ratios, the gas production, even with some of the near-term challenges and some of the sluggish growth on the liquid side for crude oil, I am still anticipating we'll continue to see growth on the gas side, barring some of the near-term December, January, February challenges. But as we get into warmer temperatures and we're seeing more wells come online, the gas growth is expected to ramp up very, very quickly. On the gas pipeline side, Lynn talked a bit about some of the challenges. We'll talk about some of the issues we were seeing on northern border. It was system-wide and really international. There was challenges up on the Canadian side as well. And so when you look at that yellow system northern border, in months of December and so far in January, they've issued 3 what are called operational flow orders because of low inventory and low pressure concerns on their system, meaning that there was a stronger pull downstream from consumers in those markets than was able to supply that system, both from North Dakota as well as the Alberta production coming down. So there was definitely some challenges associated with that. We were seeing less gas coming out of the North Dakota fields. We were seeing less gas coming out of the Canadian sides for a period of time. We did see record jumps in gas being pulled out of gas storage. That's down in the southwest part of the state and in eastern Montana, that red area that you see on slide 16. That is the WBI Baker gas storage field. So we had gas coming out of that storage field, other fields in the US and Canada to try and backfill on northern border, anything that was lost out in the field. And as of today, all those operational flow orders have been lifted. But again, we'll continue to watch the cold weather and these events that cause challenges across the board. And on slide 17 on that market share, it's a little difficult with that vertical date line there, but we did see across the board lower volumes, Canadian as well as Bakken, and then that market share where the Bakken gas just wasn't meeting all of its historic type volumes. And so we were seeing a lot of backfilling from Canadian storage coming down northern border to keep that system in a safe operating pressure and continuing to meet the market needs during these cold periods. We're continuing to see strong ethane capture in North Dakota, so that's continued to keep BTU numbers on northern border below that 1100 number that we keep an eye on. So as long as the ethane markets continue to be strong, we'll continue to likely be below that 1100 number. And so with that, I will pause and answer any questions.
I'll check and see if I've got some questions that have come in, and just a reminder of that Q&A option that's in there. Feel free to submit some questions. I do have Adam with Forum has asked, he's got a couple DAPL questions. Are producers concerned at all that this week's decision in Illinois will impact Energy Transfer's timeline for completing the expansion of the pipeline? And do you expect flows in the pipeline to start using more of that interim capacity anytime soon?
Yeah, good questions. I apologize for not covering that when we were going through the crude oil side. So, the near-term impacts are there really is no near-term immediate impact to the operations of that system. That system is expected to continue operating as it has been. The current system capacity that I use for upper ceiling is right around 750,000 barrels per day. So I'm not anticipating any near-term challenges. Obviously, the uncertainty is the big thing that this brings into play. Again, anytime these get kicked back through the regulatory process or through the judicial process, it just adds that layer of uncertainty. So if you're a producer looking at long-term plans for the Bakken or other fields, and you're looking at multi-year decisions, those are things that all get written down as concerns and where capital is going to get allocated. So again, uncertainty is never good for anyone in the business or regulatory side. So that's the biggest concern, is just the uncertainty that it brings to the table that wasn't there a few days ago.
Perfect. What has interest been like lately in the plan for east to west gas pipeline across the state? How has that been?
Good question. So here in the next several months, we'll have more information coming together. But last month was kind of the first time that we had some guidelines put together for that grant program through the Industrial Commission to deliver gas from western North Dakota to eastern North Dakota. Yes, it has been full steam ahead by a number of companies looking at how that would fit within their portfolios, how they can work together with different shippers, different end users. And so yes, incredibly active, but the Grand Forks portion, those applications are due March 1st, and then we're looking at May 1st for that larger system. So it's going to be a bit of time before some of that comes out into the public space, but to answer their question, frankly, yes, it's been incredibly active trying to find those solutions.
Any questions here in the room?
Okay.
All right, I think we'll transition over.
Thank you.
All right, yep, we're good to go.
Yes, well, thank you everyone for sticking around for this portion of our webinar. What we wanted to do was give you the opportunity to talk to the people who actually made our CARES Act project work. Just a few minutes of introduction here. We are extremely proud of what North Dakota did with the CARES Act funds. And I think it's notable that what we did here in North Dakota became the model for what's called the regrow portion of the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. And so it has become a nationwide program. I can tell you that the Department of Interior is moving forward with that program, and they had actually 26 states file notices of intent to participate in that program. So what we invented here in North Dakota is now going to expand across 26 oil and gas producing states nationwide into another federally funded program. Just very briefly, we took $66 million in CARES Act funds, and then another $6 million that was repurposed in the last legislative session. So a total of $72 million, is that right? Mm-hmm. Was invested in North Dakota's workforce. So what you can see on the screen is that those CARES Act funds in 2020 and 2021 supported over 3,300 jobs, more than 71 of our North Dakota-based service companies. They drove the completion of 81 duck wells, which added 5 frac crews to the number. plugged 316 wells, reclaimed many of those sites, and the equipment's been removed from all of them for a total of over 203,000 man hours. People that would have been unemployed and potentially left the state or left the industry had we not done the program. And so this program, like I said, has become a model for the nation. Just a couple of other infographics. When we talk about plugging a well, we've got an infographic that shows you how many people does it take to plug a well. It takes 23 different job types. It takes 64 individual people coming to that well site at various times during the plugging operation, which generally takes about a week to 10 days. So 64 individuals, and you can see the different kinds of jobs, support, field, and transportation that are involved in that. As you look at how many people does it take to reclaim a well, it takes 37 different people, 12 different job types, and this is a much longer process. The reclamation of a well site is really done in two phases. The first phase is roustabouts coming in and removing all the old producing equipment, flushing out all the old flow lines, making sure that any contamination potential is eliminated from the site. And then reclamation, soil and earth moving people come in and actually remove the surfacing material, recontour the site back to what it was before, put the topsoil down, and then we have to wait a year or two to see if we're going to get vegetation to grow again. And in some cases, if contamination is found, it's a much longer process that can take months or years to remove all of that. But that involves at least 12 different jobs and 37 individuals. And so we saw tremendous support from our industry. We wanted you to have the opportunity to talk to some of the folks that were very involved in making this program work. And its success, as I said, has led to a nationwide program that now 26 states have said that they're going to adopt the same process through using federal funds. So we're going to talk to, or you're going to hear from Kathy Nessett with Nessett Consulting, Shane Bryans with Hams Well Service, Keith Norbeck, Badlands Contracting, which is a reclamation company, and then Barrett Withers with Beaver Creek, who was involved in water transportation for the duck well work. So I'm going to pass it off, and I'm going to let Katie bring these folks up. We'll let them talk a little bit about what they did, and then they're each going to be available for some question and answer.
Perfect. Thanks, Lynn. And Kathy, I do have you up on the screen, so if you wanted to unmute your mic and anything you'd like to share, you are live.
Well, thank you very much, both to Lynn and to Katie there. I appreciate all the work that you're doing. But as we talk about this CARES Act and the numbers you showed there, Lynn, you know, I think it's important that we go back and take ourselves back to where and when this was happening, to the spring and summer of 2020, and how difficult that was. You know, you've gone through, the wells were shut in, gas plants were scaled back, people drilling stopped, oil was at a negative number, the price of crude oil. This industry was, and the state and the nation and the world were just at an absolute standstill. And I look at, you know, what North Dakota and what the federal government did in bringing these funds, these CARES Act funds. There's a few things the federal government is good at, and they do well. And this was one of them, to be honest with you. I learned through the Federal Reserve Bank work there in Minneapolis Fed that the important thing was that these dollars got out quickly and to the people who needed them. Lynn, when you were talking about the number of people, you're talking about the workers, 3,300 plus jobs out there. But I also want to remember and remind everyone, behind each one of those workers, there's a family, there's a spouse, there's children, there is extended family that are all benefiting by this. So I think that the impact of these CARES Act dollars in the scheme of things is much broader and greater than what we're actually putting the numbers to. I see you had the administrative staff counted in your numbers. I look at the Nessett office, you know, here we were one of the companies that was, you know, helped to put this project together. contracted the workers, got the contracts, the MSAs, onboarded the workers. These were people who were out of jobs, and they didn't want an unemployment check. They didn't want a stimulus check. There is a time and a place for both of those things, but these were individuals who wanted to work. And this program, thanks to you working along with Governor Burgum and bringing this $66 million of federal dollars to the oil industry, I thought it was just absolutely fabulous. I just want to, the way I look at it, it was all about the jobs, keeping our workforce here, which we're now looking to use that workforce. So it was a bridge. And I'm just so proud and of what North Dakota did here, what the DMR did, what was done here in North Dakota, and how many, and just to share with everyone, how many families were benefited by this. It was a great program. The side benefit, we got a lot of wells plugged and permanently abandoned and land reclaimed and back to commercial or to agriculture use. That was a side. The real part was saving our families, saving our workers, and we were able to do that. So with that, thank you.
Thank you so much, Kathy. We also have on the line Shane Bryans. Now, Shane, I believe we've got you on the phone. So if you're there, go ahead and say hello.
Yep. Well, thanks, Kathy or Katie. I appreciate it. Yeah, my name is Shane Bryans. I'm with Hams Well Service. We have a well service company. We have locations in Bottineau, Renville, and Burke County. So this project really created a lot of jobs in the industry when it was an emergency situation. I was looking through some of the numbers, and it kept up to 40 of my guys working and off unemployment. So it was very important for me as an employer because it kept my employees around. If they were to go on unemployment, or if they're gone for the workplace for that period of time, what are the chances that they're coming back? I mean, that's a long time frame. They're probably looking into a different field, a possible different industry, leave the area or possibly leave the state. So that's a lot of experience, and it can be very costly. It takes a lot of time for me to train and rehire new employees when things come around. So it was also wanted to talk about it. Not only impacted me, but impacted a lot of the local economy around my area. In our areas, we had a lot of local restaurants, hotels, the local gas stations, where a lot of the crews come up and stayed in the area and stimulated basically Main Street, small town North Dakota. So that helped a lot in that area as well. And also just want to talk about how much was accomplished. Like I said, the big thing was kept jobs, kept people in the industry, but there was a lot that got accomplished and just a lot of work that was done in that 4-month period. It really goes to show the quality of our workforce in the oil field in the state of North Dakota. Just really want to give Lynn and his team a lot of credit for coming up with a project in short order, and the success it achieved was really monumental, and it helped us a lot.
Thank you, Shane. We appreciate your comments, and we also have Keith Norbeck joining us from Badlands Contracting. Keith, thank you for joining us virtually. You can go ahead and unmute. And
sounds good. Thanks, Katie. I appreciate the opportunity to talk on behalf of Badlands. A little more information on Badlands Contracting. We're a Wofford City-based oil and gas service company. We're primarily focused on project management, engineering, and construction, and we work predominantly here in Western North Dakota. When 2020 rolled around, we had more than enough opportunity and work ahead of us approaching in that coming construction season, just right here in Western North Dakota. And this has already been described earlier, but when the perfect storm of the pandemic and the price war caused the oil price to collapse, we started receiving phone call after phone call, canceling project after project that was slated for that year. So it was very timely, this work that we ended up being able to do. So when the news started rolling out about the potential funding of the plugging and reclamation projects, it just gave us a lot of hope here with our team, and that there would be opportunities coming quickly that allowed us to keep our skilled staff working instead of laying them off entirely and potentially losing them for good. So we were fortunate to be able to bid and be awarded a total of 3 of the reclamation projects dating back to the inaugural package in August of 2020, and another one in October, and finally one this year in September. So a little bit about what we accomplished. We reclaimed 48 well locations. We restored what we figured roughly 88 acres back to their original use, whether that was agriculture or grazing for ranching. And in doing so, we directly retained and employed what we think is 15 workers on our team, skilled workers that is, and supported their families for the duration of the work. And indirectly, it's harder to quantify some of that, but the reclamation also supported an additional 8 to 10 subcontractor jobs, which we would look at as transportation, disposal, and among others that are a little bit harder to quantify. So as the well and completions and drilling rigs just dropped that early in 2020, the funding that was allocated to this program provided timely and much needed support for oil field services for companies out here of all sizes, which ultimately served the purpose of tackling the abandoned well problem head on. So in conclusion, when I look at these reclamation projects, we think that it provided much needed work for companies like ours at an unprecedented time when there was no clear direction of future demand for oil field services. It retains skilled oil field workers within our state, which is going to show its benefit now as the Bakken continues to move forward. And its funding created an opportunity for workers to continue to advance and develop new skills while being compensated for them, rather than sit on unemployment programs at home, not developing skills. And finally, it maintained our company's ability to continue to grow and support the oil and gas industry right here in North Dakota for years to come. So I'd just like to thank you for the opportunity to share our story as it relates to this reclamation initiative. Thanks, Katie.
Thank you so much, Keith. We appreciate it. We also have joining us Barrett Withers. Barrett, you can go ahead and unmute and share your screen as well if you'd like. Barrett is with Beaver Creek LLC out of Newtown. Thanks for joining us, Barrett.
Hey, no problem. Thanks for having us, Katie. And we really appreciate the opportunity just to join you. This was a great opportunity for us. I won't reiterate what everybody else has said, but my hat's off to all of the prime contractors, Kathleen Nessett in particular, and her folks. I mean, what an amazing job they did in pulling this together, getting the MSAs out there quickly. And the biggest thing that we saw was between the prime contractors and their ability to not only fund the project, but actually pay in a timely manner was just a huge thing for us. We've seen some of the other companies that we've worked with in the industry, we've seen 90 to 120 day terms on payment. And to keep our folks working was huge, but secondly, be able to cash flow the projects was a big win for us. We saw upwards of a 73% drop in revenue quarter over quarter when the pandemic hit. And I think all of us were scrambling and trying to figure out what to do. So huge thanks to Lynn Helms and his organization and the ability to not only get this project funded, get the people out there quickly. We try to keep drivers that have on average about a 30-year tenure in doing this work. And when we start over again, and we're happy to bring on new drivers, but when you lose 30 years of experience in the industry, it's a big change to how the work can get done safely. So appreciate everybody. Beaver Creek has been around for upwards of 14 years. We are a native-owned company that works on the Fort Berthold Indian Reservation. And to get the opportunity to not only work around the area, we looked at sending trucks all the way down to Texas just to keep our people working, but we were grateful for the opportunity to keep people at home where we're used to working. So thanks.
Thank you, Barrett. We do have one question that came in, and since I have you up, I'll just ask, what are some of your expectations like in the next year for Beaver Creek as we continue to recover from the pandemic?
Great question. We are seeing a lot of opportunities for growth. The industry continues to, as Lynn has kind of gone over what he sees out there in the industry, it is going to be a little slow Q1 like we usually see, but we see a lot of opportunities. We get approached by a lot of E&Ps out there in the industry that have shown frac crews are coming back to work, drilling rigs are staying active. So we think it's going to be a great 2022 year, kind of similar to what we've seen pre-pandemic levels.
Thank you, Barrett. I have another question that came in that I might toss over to Kathy if Kathy is willing to answer. The question that came in was future plugging and reclamation work. I mean, CARES Act was really focused on getting people working out in the field during a really hard year in 2020. But we are looking at a new infrastructure bill that had gotten approved to help support plugging and reclamation. And so the question was just, you know, what do companies hope for out of that infrastructure bill that has come down? And are there any comments, I guess, that Nesset may have, and then also Lynn as well?
Mm-hmm.
You bet, Katie. Thanks very much. You know, that's really a good way forward. And I say that we have these infrastructure, bill funds that are coming out to the different states, and there is work that needs to be done. I look at it as that every industry has some challenges. Every industry has something that needs to be cleaned up, fixed, done better, or whatever. And part in the oil and gas industry is cleaning up and plugging and reclaiming these wells. This is nothing special to North Dakota. It is nationwide. Every state that has oil production in its history has this issue. And to be able to take these federal dollars from the infrastructure bill and to be able to do two things: keep our workers working. We want to keep our workforce, as all the gentlemen have said here, but we also want to do a good project. And that project is to take care of these old well bores that, through really no fault of anybody currently in the industry, these are old wells that need to be reclaimed. And I think it's a wonderful project. I think we have built the model here. As Lynn has said, North Dakota, we not only built it, we did it, we lived it, and we proved that it worked. So now we go and expand on it.
Thank you, Kathy. And I'll also toss the same question, I guess, over to Lynn. Probably also a little wrap up on CARES Act, and then also shifting over into what comes next.
Sure. So the CARES Act is over. The original deadline for CARES Act spending was, of course, December 31st of 20, and the federal government realized that was not really rational, so they extended it through December 31st of 2021. And so that is complete. All of our funds have been expended, and there will be a section on our website that shows the different areas where the funds were expended, where the funds came from, and what happened with them. So CARES Act is a wrap. But what's exciting is that going forward, the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act created this nationwide program, and there are 5 different types of grants that states can apply for under that act, as well as a federal program for wells on federal lands, and a tribal program for wells on tribal lands. So nobody's being left out. We have identified in the initial round, looking at the one type of grant, that we've got 94 additional what we call orphan wells, abandoned or idle and orphan wells that need to be plugged. We still need to finish the reclamation on 119 sites that started under the CARES Act. And then there are, of course, will be the additional 94 sites. So there is a lot of work to be done over the next 4 or 5 years under the IIJA, as we call it, or the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. And North Dakota will be an active participant in that. One of the requirements there is that if there are financial assurances in place, that those be utilized to offset any costs that can be offset. And I think what you'll see in the CARES Act project is that we have already taken $4.7 million in bonds and applied that to the plugging and reclamation program in addition to the CARES Act fund. So we've got all the processes in place. As Kathy said, we've used them all. We know how to do this. And so over the next 5 years, in fact, some of the grant types extend out through 2030. The entire nation is going to go through the same process and is anticipating that somewhere in the neighborhood of 100 to 150,000 orphan wells will be plugged and removed from the landscape nationwide. So our problem is a relatively small number. Maybe that's why we were so successful in inventing the program. But what you see in the federal program is what you got in North Dakota in 2020 and 2021. So we're just so grateful for these great North Dakota people who took this, the bull by the horns when we rolled this CARES Act project out and got all the MSAs, got all the subcontractors, got all the people on the payroll and made this thing work in a very short time frame. It just really shows the North Dakota pride and the work ethic and the caring that our North Dakota employers have for their employees. So a deep debt of gratitude to the 4 folks that showed up today, as well as the other 67, 68 contractors that participated or service companies that participated. I don't know if any more questions came in.
We do have one question that came in that was just on, I think also just lessons learned from the CARES Act program. As a part of that 2020, we plugged and reclaimed a lot of wells. The state did a lot of wells, and so we learned a lot of information there on costs and also the amount of time it takes. How are we taking those lessons that we've learned and then moving forward into the Regrow Act?
Yeah, great. So I think we all knew very, very well how to plug wells. That process is very well defined. However, I think that our well plugging industry in North Dakota was very, very small. And so what we have seen as other states like Michigan and Ohio have seen is through the program that we started with the CARES Act, the plugging industry has expanded 3 or 4-fold. So we actually have new companies, new equipment, new infrastructure for plugging wells. The process we didn't learn a great deal about, although we do understand that every well is an individual, and as you move on it, there will be surprises. Where we really learned was how to do reclamation. And the first thing we learned was it needs to be done in 2 phases. Don't try to go in and demolish the equipment and remove the infrastructure and then go directly to reclamation. Do that in 2 phases. So there's a set of service companies and contractors that are very, very good at removing equipment and removing any future potential for contamination. And then there's another set of people who are very good at recontouring the site and removing the surface material, measuring the contamination and cleaning that up. So number 1 lesson, do that in 2 phases. The other thing we learned is you can't hurry reclamation. You are working with nature a great deal. You're also going to find surprises about what contamination is on site and how long it's been there. And so that process needs to play out over many months, maybe even years. And in North Dakota, extremely difficult. We've only got about 5 months a year when we can do that work. The other 7 months, it looks like it does outside there today. It's ice and snow. And you don't do reclamation during the 7 months of ice and snow and spring thaw. So those would be the 2 big lessons that we learned in terms of being able to reduce costs for the reclamation side, is do it in 2 phases and plan for the reclamation side of that or phase of that to take a significant amount of time. That's one great thing about the IIJA, the Regrow Act, is that it's allowing for up to 5 years for those funds to be expended. So we don't have to hurry, and we can really take our time, allow the folks like Badlands and Beaver Creek to do their work and to do it really, really well.
Perfect, thank you. We had one other question that came in, and I think it was around prioritization. So as we look forward, is there a specific kind of prioritization that the state's looking at in regards to any plugging and reclamation that's going to happen moving forward?
Okay, I was hoping that question might go to Kathy because they were really good at organizing and prioritizing how the wells went. And I don't know if she's still on, but she may be able to describe for us the process that Nesset went through. And then, you know, I'll finish up. But Kathy, are you available to talk to us about the process that Nesset and Larry Dockin and Gene Dehan went through in order to make sure that, you know, the well plugging operation went smooth?
You know, thanks, Lynn, and I'm glad to share that information. You know, Nesset was one of the primary firms to bring this process together. You did assign and hired Larry Dockin to coordinate this, and he did a fabulous job. He works here at Nesset. But as we have these primary companies, you know, what we needed to do was understand what was being asked and what the task at hand was. I would say the biggest challenge was time. You know, it really got down to the point where I believe we started on August 20th of 2020 and had to be done by December 31st or 30th of that year. We had 5 months to have this project complete. I just can't tell you how important it was to have such good North Dakota workers. And if you remember, part of the requirement was that they were North Dakota based. These were North Dakota homegrown companies and workers who were primary to this job. So the CARES Act money that came to North Dakota went to North Dakota families. The techniques that we learned and the lessons learned, but the main thing I remember is just calling these workers and saying, we have a job for you. It's not what you usually do, but it takes the same skills. And it was incredible how grateful and thankful all the workers were, and my hat's off to them.
Up on that, one of the things that I remember from the last 10 days of August was that Nesset basically put together a reconnaissance team. So we had listed all the wells, and we had already gone through the process of confiscating the wells, but all we had was a well list. And so we knew the geography and the names and numbers of the wells, but they put together a reconnaissance team and immediately went to the field and started talking to landowners about access and what's the right way to access the well site, find the well site, look at what equipment is on the well, what equipment's going to be needed. And then several wells rose to the top priority right away because we discovered that they had pressure on the wellhead, or they were leaking, or there was some type of environmental risk associated with those wells. So I think that's probably the key thing is, you know, get your initial well list down, but then you need a reconnaissance team right away to hit the field, find out how you access sites and whether you have access to the sites. Let the landowner know what's coming and what's happening, and then evaluate the well to figure out what equipment's going to be needed and what danger it poses to the environment in and around it. So we had a significant number of surprises in wells that had a lot of pressure at the surface, or leaking equipment, or a leaking wellhead rose to the top right away.
Well, I don't have any other questions that have come in. I just wanted to, before we leave the director's cut, indicate that we do also have more information on our website. So if you go to dmr.nd.gov, we have been working on that. page there where you can actually go and get a bit more information about the work that was done for the CARES Act program. But then you can also click down and just read more about North Dakota's plugging and reclamation and how that standard process works within the state. And so again, that's just dmr.nd.gov. And if anyone has other questions or they're looking for information they can't see, they can always reach out to the North Dakota Oil and Gas Division.
So Katie, where is the information on the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act work going to be? Is that going to be on that website? Is there going to be a separate section where people can go and watch as that project rolls out?
Yeah, so hopefully if you're following along, you'll be able to see the screen here. And so that information will be underneath oil and gas. You'll be able to click on programs, permitting, and then right within this page here, we'll have a link underneath our programs that'll go directly to the Infrastructure and Jobs Act once that's available. Right now, if you're also on that homepage, we will also link it just underneath our news and resources. This is also where you can see the CARES Act funding, where you can click there and then you can get the full report here on this link on the right. And that will open up all of the information that Lynn just reiterated on the CARES Act funding available to you on the website today.
Great. And so what we know on Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act at this point is we submitted our notice of intent with our initial estimate of how many wells, orphan wells we have in the state and how many sites to reclaim. That's being processed by the Department of Interior. By the end of the month, they are supposed to let us know how much money is available for the state of North Dakota. And then in May, there's a deadline for applying for the first type of grant. That's the first grant application deadline. So we'll be posting that documentation as we go along, as well as tracking for you the wells and the sites as they're plugged and reclaimed.
Correct. Great. Well, thank you guys so much for joining us online and for your questions and in person, you brave souls. Everybody have a great and safe day.